So this is a different type of video that I've kind of wanted to do for quite some time now, and really I've been thinking of trying to do a film review because, for those of you who don't know, I basically had a YouTube channel a while back called MB Film Reviews, which if you want to go and watch it, feel free, but it's absolutely terrible. I had no idea what I was talking about through a lot of the time, and I'd like to think my taste in films and what I consider good has evolved to a point, because obviously it's all subjective at the end of the day, it's about opinions, but nevertheless this is a video I've been wanting to do, and I figured what better way to do this than with Avengers Endgame. Obviously I'm going to try my absolute hardest to avoid spoilers, and I've waited for a while to do this video just so that the hype kind of dies down and I can decide myself how I feel about the film. I've posted all over my Twitter and my Facebook and Instagram that I'm a big fan of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. I've been a big fan of it for years and years and years now. And I think that although I haven't grown emotionally invested into the world that has been created, I think it was probably about the time Phase 3 started, which was when Captain America Civil War, for instance, came out onwards, that I really started to pay attention to what the MCU was doing. Obviously before then I was aware of it, but I wasn't exactly that emotionally into it. I love the first Avengers movie. I think particularly the movies that I love are the Avengers Assemble, Captain America Civil War, Thor Ragnarok, and Avengers Infinity War, obviously up to this point before this movie. And obviously Infinity War's got the most reference and relevance to this because this is essentially a two-part story. Although Infinity War works as a complete movie, with Thanos being the protagonist of that film, when that structure of that film was a beginning, middle and end, and the ending of it was what made it almost a cinematic masterpiece in my opinion. And I'm not exaggerating when I say Avengers Infinity War is the Empire Strikes Back of this generation of moviegoers. I think the way that the balance between sacrifice and the themes of loss within Infinity War, so you look at the instance, the countless times that Thanos had to sacrifice Gamora, the times that Vision could be sacrificed for the sake of the Mind Stone, the fact that Doctor Strange can sacrifice the Time Stone, Tony can sacrifice the idea of having a child, although that's, I'm trying hard to avoid spoilers here, but and then you get the idea of Captain America willing to sacrifice himself, and then multiple times characters are punished in that movie because they are either unwilling to sacrifice what they love the most, or they sacrifice things but too late. So for example, Gamora is unwilling to sacrifice Nebula, or that Wanda eventually decides to sacrifice Vision, but because it happens too late, Thanos ends up getting all the Infinity Stones, snaps his fingers, and basically half the universe gets wiped out. So I think Infinity War is one of the best movies ever made, actually, and although I don't watch as many films now as I used to, I definitely think Infinity War was just a masterpiece in storytelling. I wasn't a big fan of it at first, actually. I liked it, but didn't love it. I felt that the movie moved plot point to plot point too quickly, and it could have slowed down a bit more, but upon repeat viewings, I've grown to really appreciate what Anthony and Joe Russo and the writers Christopher Marcus and Stephen McFeely were getting at, so nevertheless, so I will kind of get into my thoughts on Endgame because it's only about 3 minutes into this video. I think Avengers Endgame deals with the themes of losing, how the universe has dealt with the loss at the end of Infinity War. It's dealt with, and the Avengers themselves are directly dealing with their defeat at the hands of Thanos, and we needed to see that. This movie is 3 hours and about a minute long, and I think some people may very well complain at the runtime. Although I do think that the runtime is somewhat justified. I think the first act of this movie is pretty much about the characters dealing with the end of the last movie, and that's not really a spoiler because it happens right at the beginning of the film. I will say the way that they do it on the Russos, Marcus and McFeely do it on some levels quite interesting, particularly with the decisions they made with Thor. I wasn't when I've seen the movie twice now in cinemas, and when I saw it the first time I wasn't on board with it, and I'm kind of more on board with it. It makes sense to a point, but I'm not really overtly enthusiastic about it. I love the way that Captain America and Iron Man's story arcs end in this film. I'm not going to obviously say what happens for those who haven't seen the film, but suffice to say that I think the way these two guys' character arcs are really reflective of each other throughout the MCU, and I think the way that both of them end is a very satisfying conclusion. I think that the movie's pacing is a bit off compared to Infinity War, whereas I felt Infinity War had a natural flow throughout the whole movie. It doesn't really feel like there's a section that drags. It feels like every section of Infinity War needs to be there. There was at least a couple of moments in Endgame where I felt that that could have been took from the movie, that could have been done this, they could have rearranged that a little bit. I'm just thinking tonally and narratively, I think that the movie definitely does take its time in the beginning. I think once you get to the second act of the film, it does start to pick up. And obviously the final battle, everyone's been comparing to... everyone's been mentioning how fantastic it is and how much it... blows you away. There's a super group assembly of characters in the final battle. For me, while I did think the final battle, obviously in terms of scope and spectacle, and I do get that the Russos had to deliver on this because this is the end of the first. I know that Kevin Feige, president of the Marvel Studios, has said that Spider-Man: Far From Home, which is to come out in the next couple of months, is the conclusion of the first 3 phases of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. The Endgame's the proper, real end to the story, at least as of yet. I don't know if Far From Home is connected to Endgame in any way. I'll find out when that film comes out. But Endgame feels like a true ending to at least the original 6 Avengers as a team. Obviously, there's some of them that can go off in different directions after this film, but I'm more talking about the fact that this is the last time you see them as a group together. For me, the final battle, I don't think it was anywhere near as good as what people suggest it is. I think that this is the biggest problem I had. Now, this is kind of... this is going to be very hard to do without avoiding spoilers. What I would say then, and I will say that a sensible thing to do is that if you, just very quickly, I know I've said this way too late, if you have not seen Avengers Endgame and don't want to be spoiled, I'm going to try to avoid it, but I can't promise fully that I'm going to avoid spoilers here in this section, so just in case, go and see the movie and come back to this video if you want to watch it. But what I would say is, the big problem I had with Avengers Endgame, tonally, I felt that there's a lot of humour within Endgame. And in the final battle itself, there's quite a bit of humour. But the problem throughout the whole movie was that I didn't feel there was much tension within the storyline. Whereas, and I know that the circumstances in Infinity War was different because Infinity War is essentially the first of a 2-part story. And Infinity War, obviously, you know that on some level that Thanos is going to win at the end of the film. So, but the action sequences were done in a way that was... I had no idea what was going to happen. I knew that probably some characters wouldn't die. I knew on some smaller level that what would probably happen, probably might or might not happen. But the way that it was done and the way that subverted expectations throughout the whole storyline was so good. But more importantly, I felt like the characters were in jeopardy, real jeopardy in that movie. In Endgame, I kind of felt like going into the final battle, obviously... You can probably guess what the ultimate outcome is, even if you don't know if who makes it out alive or not, but you can guess what ultimately happens. And I just think that they could have made this movie a bit more serious in nature to Infinity War. Still don't lose the humour, but Infinity War, for example, I know I'm going to keep comparing this to Infinity War, but it's natural because this is the overarching story over the 2 films. Infinity War has some of the best moments of the MCU, the most hilarious moments are in Avengers Infinity War. But the problem with it is, when it gets down to the nitty-gritty stuff, it's generally a serious movie. It generally gets the job done. It fits the tonally and narratively, it's spot on. It doesn't really... What's the word I'm looking for? Going down the comedic route too much. It doesn't feel... It isn't too light-hearted given what happens within that film. And Endgame really, to an extent, should follow suit. I felt like there could have been a bit more... If there had been a bit more tension and a bit more dramatic effect in this one, then I genuinely think that this movie could have been as good as Infinity War. But look, I still really like the film. I think the performance, I'll end on the positives. I think the performances of the film are very, very good. I think Robert Downey Jr., this is probably one of the best performances that I've seen from him across the MCU. I think Chris Evans, obviously I love Captain America at this point, and Chris Evans was a big part of that. I think in particular, Jeremy Renner, Scarlett Johansson, and Chris Hemsworth are excellent within this movie. The way that they managed to get their roles of Thor, Black Widow and Hawkeye, whichever order I put respectively, they managed to do it so well, and I was very impressed with the way that their acting ability was able to shine throughout this. Because a lot of the characters go through trauma of this movie, and so they should. Mark Ruffalo obviously does a good enough job as Bruce Banner, but he obviously doesn't have as much to do in this one. But in general, I did find that for a lot of the movie, the centre is mainly on the 6 main Avengers characters. Obviously, you have Rocket, you have Nebula, and you have you have Scott Lang, Ant-Man. That's all very well and done. Paul Rudd was very good in this film as well, actually. But in general, the performances from the main original 6 were very, very good. They knew they had to go out with a bang for this, and they've done it very, very well. So, if I'll sum up this mess of a review, I think Avengers Endgame is a very good movie. I think that it ends the story of the Infinity Saga very, very well. I think that the way that For me, my favourite act is the first act. I think that the first act of the movie, which is definitely the slowest, by the way, if you're going and expecting balls-to-the-wall action from the get-go, I think you'll be a bit disappointed. The first, probably sort of 45, 50 minutes of this movie is about dealing with the effects of the last film. And that was a good thing, because we saw a universe where the snap actually has effect. And that's what was so needed and vital for the story. So I think that the way that was done was excellent. I think the action scenes are very good. I think some of the humour is just so outright funny. As much as I think the movie doesn't take itself seriously enough, it doesn't mean I didn't enjoy the humour. I think that was very well done. Effects, visual effects, storytelling was strong enough for the most part. Writing, characterization, all those things that make up a crucial good movie or good story, I think was done well enough. I just think it falls in comparison to Infinity War. So if I had to give this a rating out of 10, I would say a solid 7.5, or if you want to go, I'll probably say a solid 7 or 8. I just think isn't anywhere near as good as Infinity War. But again, I think Infinity War is such a high standard that it's not an insult to Endgame. Trust me. So, if you let me know in the comments down below, let me know if you want me to do maybe a spoiler reaction to Avengers Endgame. Or I mean, this is just something I wanted to do anyway. If it doesn't do well, doesn't do well. But I think it's a very worthy conclusion, and it's a well-earned victory lap of everything that's happened in the 22 MCU movies at this point at the time of recording. And I think Marvel deserve a very good pat on the back for themselves. And I'm going to be very interested to see now what direction they take in the future. Hopefully it's a good one. So I love yous and leave yous, guys. Let me know if you enjoyed this review. Let me know if you enjoyed the video. And let me know if you want me to do more of these in the future. And then we'll see what happens. Anyway, guys, I'll see you all later, and take care.